Here's something you hear from conservatives sometimes. Being a Trump supporter, or being Republican, is the new being gay, which is to say that the stigmas, circumstances, and consequences of coming out as a MAGA person, or even just a conservative in general, can be similar to how it used to be and to a lesser extent in some situations still is for people who come out as gay. This type of comparison induces a knee-jerk reaction from progressives who are quick to say that that's fucking stupid for whatever reasons work for them. But while you may not agree with the severity that the sentiment implies, it's not as if the two things have nothing in common. For example, coming out as gay might alienate a more staunchly traditional or religious family. They might no longer accept you for who you are and how you feel. While coming out as a Trump supporter in a fiercely left-wing family, for instance, would have very much the same results. In both cases, you might be excommunicated, refused to be listened to, written out of wills, and effectively disowned. I don't see much of a difference in being hated for the sexual preferences you happen to have versus being hated for the political preferences you happen to have. I mean, what aspects of who you are actually define who you are? Gay people are more than just gay people, and Republicans are more than just Republicans. What is the purest, most reduced set of identity-based aspects that adequately account for your core essence? It's hard because on one hand, I don't think any human should be reduced to just a few definitive traits of existence that govern their whole status and modus operandi in the world. But on the other hand, the more things you ascribe to your identity, the more you become fiercely defensive about challenges to things you consider to be part of who you are. Maybe you've seen somebody make fun of horses, and you don't care because you don't feel any particular way about horses. You're like, fuck horses, which you would not say if you really didn't feel any particular way about horses. But anyway, but now what if you love horses? You see them galloping in the wind, and you're like, man, that's so beautiful, and now you're like, I want to fuck horses. What if you consider your love for horses to be part of who you are? Now, when somebody makes fun of horses, you're going to take that more personally. You're going to be like, don't make fun of horses unless they can't make me come, and the person you're talking to will probably not talk to you ever again. What's the difference between liking horses and identifying yourself as a person who likes horses? It's perspective, and it's pretty important. The more things you consider to be your identity, the more sensitive you are. But even if you just have a couple things you've centered yourself around, that still means you're now hyper-focusing on these few aspects and will become sensitive about them quicker and more so. A potential solution I've been able to come up with for this dilemma is to identify as nothing. Whatever you are isn't who you are. You're not gay, you're not straight, you're not black, you're not white, you're not a man or a woman. You are not beholden to any of these categories. You're not obligatorily associated with them inherently. You're not even human. You are simply a being, an entity. You're not offended by anything because you don't belong to anything. You don't take anything personally because you're not personal. The problem is how that applies to things like empathy and compassion, or feelings in general. But losing those is a small price to pay for achieving fucking nothing. Okay, I don't know. I don't know how to fix ourselves compulsively hoarding materials as food for our identities until they balloon into these massively obese and engorged sacks of shit that can violently deflate in an explosion of forceful air with one pinprick. Our egos are getting bigger and weaker simultaneously. It's unsustainable. But back to the gay and Republican thing. So losing the support of your family is one similarity. Another thing they mention is discrimination in the workplace. Now, of course, none of these things are super common for either side. We don't live in the 1930s as far as gays are concerned, and progressives haven't taken over the world yet as far as Republicans are concerned. Everything you hear about bad things happening to either of these sides is rare and simply amplified via loudspeaker by people who have an active ideological aim. Except gay people in church and conservatives in Hollywood. That shit is going on regularly, and those breeding grounds of intolerance. The entire cast of Will and Grace just honked their horns for soft doxing and blacklisting Trump donors from any project they're involved in, and countless other producers, directors, and actors are on record saying they'll refuse to work with conservatives. As far as the doxing argument goes, people on the left will tell you that it's already public information, which is true. But it's public in a place that has zero people's attention. Nobody knows where to find it, and it's not occurring to anybody to try. But when you then call for this information to become super public, with a motive attached to your requested spotlight, that is going to cause some actions to be taken. You are mobilizing the populace. It's actually similar to a celebrity retweeting an insult from someone with no followers. That tweet was previously public, but nobody could see it to reply to it. By retweeting it, the celebrity has has opened the floodgates for anyone and everyone to pile on hate to this person, but the difference in that case is that nobody cares because we're all like, LOL, they deserve it. With republishing donor lists, you've got a quarter of the country, the progressives, going, LOL, they deserve it because they finance hate or some shit, while the rest of the political sphere is like, hey, that's not cool, these people can donate to whoever they want and shouldn't be targetedly harassed for it. Except the alt-right, which will already have started organizing a dox of their own in retaliation because they're big fans of fighting fire with less effective fire. Personally, I've never heard of doxing ever having been used benevolently. It's not like people ever go, hey, this guy really helps out in the community, here's his address and phone number, go mail him some gifts and call him up to say thanks. If you are revealing people's sensitive and identifying information, you are being bad, because even if that shit is already available, nobody's noticed. It's like telling everyone your neighbor keeps his door unlocked at night. That information is readily available to anyone who wants to conduct that investigation. All they have to do is go over there at 2 in the morning and try to open the door. But most people won't. Most people wouldn't even dream of doing that. And you are giving information to people who otherwise wouldn't have it, paving the way for them to take actions they otherwise wouldn't take. So you've got the conservatives shunned in Hollywood. Meanwhile, gay people are still trying to make Christianity work for them for some reason, and it's really not. They encounter very regular pushback, which isn't their fault, but the Bible is pretty clear about that, so I would search elsewhere if you're looking for enlightenment that doesn't involve living your entire life in repentant celibacy, fighting against your innate deviance, which is what that God expects of you. Another way gays and conservatives are similar, though not extremely yet, is how they can both be the victims of assault specifically for who they are. If your news intake is mostly Democratic, you probably don't hear about this, but people wearing MAGA hats are attacked not that infrequently now. They are also sometimes the attackers, of course, but so are gay people sometimes, which makes that avenue of reasoning pointless. Every type of person can be an attacker or a defender in any given situation. I don't believe anyone in a MAGA hat has died yet as a result of an attack, but I bet my whole life it'll happen eventually. They've been beaten close to death before, although it's more common for them to just get drinks thrown at them or yelled at, but if you're going to belittle those types of scenarios while saving your empathy for the exact same situations as experienced by gay people, I have to wonder whether your selectivity in regards to compassion prevents you from actually being a good person. I'm also curious towards the crowd who would dismiss these instances of Trump supporters being attacked because those numbers fail to rival the number of gays who have suffered. Why do we have to wait for the body counts to be equal before we condemn, or at least don't support, a new form of hate? How many Trump supporters would have to be kicked to death in alleyways before you'd be like, okay, yeah, this is becoming a bit of a problem? Although that's kind of wrong, because crime is an unsolvable problem already. And then is it even a problem? That's what's weird to think about, is like, are hate crimes a problem? When they happen, obviously, they are individual problems. But as a concept, don't we pretty much have as much of a lid on that shit already as we kind of possibly can? It's not like they aren't illegal. It's not like they don't carry large sentences when convicted. It's not like you aren't severely punished for committing one. The hell else is there to do? Our law system is hella good at punishing hate crimes, and is an unsung hero at preventing all the hate crimes you can imagine that don't happen because it's illegal. If someone is going to commit one despite the laws in effect, can you really stop them? You can catch them in the act, but the problem with hate crimes is the same as the problem with all premeditated crimes, if they even are premeditated. I'm sure most aren't. But premeditation that leaves no trace is undetectable. You can be like, gee, I wish there were 0 hate crimes ever, but the fact that there are some doesn't mean we're failing. We're actually doing amazingly with how few there are, if you ask me. And the only way to lower that number even further would be to do some psychopath bullshit where the government is hacked into your brain and waves a red flag and locks you up whenever you have a random violent thought. I've only seen like one episode of that anime, so don't ask me about it. Even making this argument, though, about how gays and conservatives are not so different on the victimhood scale is unsavory because it plays into the victimhood mentality. But it's like, if anyone is having trouble seeing things our way, then maybe we can make them see us in their way. Like, if you want your social status to be valued by how oppressed you are, then you could at least give Republicans some of the points they deserve. Yeah, they control the White House now, but they didn't 4 years ago, and I don't think you gave them any points back then either. But I still deplore that way of looking at things. Everybody's too obsessed with how persecuted they are to take any individual responsibility for how they might have fucked their own life up by making their own choices with the free agency they have as human beings in the freest and most opportunity-rich country in the world, Because once you internalize that, once you internalize that you managed to fail here, and once you acknowledge all the bricks that were laid out for you to choose your own path, and that despite every advantage that was given to you by growing up here in America as opposed to some less fortunate place, if you're not American, just apply whatever parts of this make sense for your region, and you then realize that the problem might have just been you, I don't know if anything can hit harder than that. That's probably brutal. People would rather live their lives perpetuating a fake war with society than face that shit themselves. It's actually somehow easier to do that. It's easier to externalize blame for decades than it is to take a few honest minutes of self-reflection. That's how afraid everyone is of their own inadequacies. And then they're like, oh, how can I change the world to better accommodate me rather than change myself to accommodate the world? I don't have a conclusion to this. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and I'll see you guys next time.